Matt Decker with Leverage Wealth Management here, and today we are going to be talking about some of the benefits associated with indexed universal life insurance and a history of the IRS limitations surrounding life insurance. I think that this is a crucially important topic to understand if you're interested in purchasing an indexed universal life insurance contract for something like tax-advantaged growth and tax-advantaged income. In order to understand where we are today in the life insurance landscape, specifically the life insurance landscape as an asset class, you have to understand where we've been. And so let me take you back to the 1970s and the 1980s. Life insurance had virtually no IRS limitations and guidelines surrounding how much money could be put in and the overall structures of the policies. And so when universal life insurance came out in the mid to late 70s, early 80s, people started using life insurance as a major tax shelter. Now, why in the world would they use life insurance as a tax shelter? Well, there's two massive reasons why people would use life insurance as a tax shelter, because before regulations were put in place, before this was on the IRS's radar, life insurance would grow with no tax. So it had tax-advantaged growth, and you could take income tax-free. So you had a vehicle that functioned a lot like Roth IRAs of today. Money would be put in, it would grow without any 1099s with no taxation, and then you could access it later on tax-free, tax-advantaged. Now, since there were no guidelines in place in terms of how much money could be put into these policies, I'm going to give you an example of what was going on in the early 80s. You had super wealthy individuals that would do something along these lines. They'd buy a life insurance policy that had a $10,000 death benefit, okay? A really small policy. Now, in today's world, how much do you think a $10,000 death benefit life insurance policy might cost you? Well, it totally depends on your age and your health, but let's just say that for example purposes, a $10,000 death benefit policy today is going to cost you something like $75 per month, okay? And that's probably high, right? $75 a month. Well, that's not what was going on back in the early 80s. You had super wealthy individuals that were buying, as an example, a $10,000 death benefit policy, yet they were putting in maybe $100,000 worth of premium. $100,000 worth of premium for a policy that's only going to pay out a $10,000 death benefit? And the IRS is thinking to themselves, wait a second, we've got a problem, because this premium strategy is obviously a tax shelter. You have somebody who's paying for a $10,000 death benefit policy, and the cost of that policy is astronomically low. And yet they're paying a $100,000 premium. Why in the world would they do that? Because the $100,000 that's going into that policy is largely growing tax-free and can be accessed later on tax-free. And what you've just discovered is the greatest tax shelter that has ever existed. The IRS realized this really quickly. Didn't take them very long to understand that they had a problem on their hands. And so they did a couple things. They passed 3 pieces of legislation throughout the 80s, starting in 1982 all the way up through 1988. And those 3 pieces of legislation are known today as Tamra, Tephra, and Defra. And this is boring, but this is important. Essentially, what these 3 pieces of legislation did is they all put limitations on how much money could be placed inside these life insurance contracts based on the death benefit of those contracts. So no longer was it going to be allowed for you to buy a $10,000 life insurance policy and yet put $100,000 worth of premium into it. That's an obvious tax shelter. You're skirting the system. The IRS is now unable to collect any tax revenue on the growth or distribution of that $100,000. And so these three rules, Tamra, Tephra, Defra, implemented between 1982 and 1988, changed the landscape in terms of life insurance. Now, what's crucial for you to understand about these three limitations is exactly what they did. Because in putting in place these three limitations, the IRS did something really special. They actually immortalized the benefits of life insurance because they did not take away the tax-free growth and the tax-advantaged distributions of life insurance. They immortalized those two things. So life insurance will be now and forever on a vehicle in which you can put money in, that money can grow without tax, and you can distribute that money without tax. So the two benefits, the two reasons that people were using life insurance as a tax shelter were actually written into the IRS code with Tamra, Tephra, and Defra. The only caveat is that the limitations were based on the relationship between the premium that you were paying to the death benefit that you were buying. Why is that important? It's important because the IRS, in these three rules, in these three rulings, these three pieces of legislation, they gave us a roadmap of how to use cash value life insurance as an asset class that gets tax-advantaged growth and tax-advantaged distributions. They gave us the rule book. We know exactly how to structure these policies within the IRS rules in order to take advantage of two of the most important benefits that you can look for in a vehicle when it comes to taxation. So what exactly did these rules do? Well, let me show you, and I think the best way to show you is to just give you kind of a sample that I'm making up off the top of my head. So let's assume for a second that you want to buy a $1 million life insurance policy. That's the death benefit. $1 million death benefit. What Tamra, Tephra, and Defra did is they said, well, if you are a 55-year-old female and you are in what's called, standard non-tobacco health, so you're a non-smoker and your health is average, for a 55-year-old female who's standard non-tobacco buying a $1 million death benefit, Tamra, Tephra, and Defra did two really important things. The first thing that they did was they instituted what's called a minimum premium. So here's the minimum premium, and let's say that the minimum premium is $6,000 per year. So the minimum premium for this $1 million death benefit policy is $6,000 per year. The second thing that these three regulations did is they also gave you a maximum premium. And what this maximum premium says is in order for this to still be considered life insurance, in order for this to still get those two crucial tax benefits of tax-advantaged growth, you're not taxed on the growth of your money, and tax-advantaged distributions, in order for you to retain those two benefits, you can't pay more than this stated maximum premium. So let's say that the maximum premium in this case is something like $30,000. So what the IRS just gave us was the roadmap to structuring these policies within the rules and still retaining those two crucial tax benefits that are associated with life insurance and not very many other vehicles. So if you ever hear me talk about structuring policies the right way in order to maximize cash and maximize income, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about following the rule book that the IRS has already given us. And by following the rule book, what I mean is we are trying to pay just under the maximum premium defined by the IRS based on your age, your risk class, and the amount of insurance that you're buying. Your age, your risk class, and the amount of insurance that you're buying. And the closer that we get to this maximum premium of $30,000 in this example, the closer that we get, the more efficient your policy is, the faster it's going to grow, the lower your fees, and we are basically guaranteed that the two most important tax benefits associated with life insurance, tax-advantaged growth, no tax on your growth, and tax-advantaged income, no income tax on your distributions if it's done the right way. We immortalize those two benefits of this contract as long as we play within the rules. And what the IRS did in 1982, 1984, and 1988 is crucial because all those policies that were written with, say, their $10,000 death benefit with their $100,000 premium, all those policies actually retained their tax-advantaged benefits. They let those individuals that purchased those policies, they let them keep their tax shelter. Let me say that again. The IRS allowed those individuals that were gaming the system to keep the tax shelters that they had purchased. Now, why am I telling you that? I'm telling you that because Tamra, Tephra, and Defra are regulations that could change. The IRS could come in tomorrow and say, well, we know that we, gave you these tax benefits associated with life insurance as long as you, stay within the bounds that we proposed, but we're changing that. We're taking away the tax benefits of life insurance. If the IRS or if legislators decided to do that, they could, but they've already set precedent to allow those individuals that have already purchased contracts to keep the tax benefits associated with those contracts at the time of purchase. Now, why in the world do we love Index Universal Life Insurance so much? Well, the reason that I love Index Universal Life Insurance so much, as long as it's done the right way and you're playing within the rule book that the IRS has established, is because there's really only one other vehicle that gives us those same benefits that is comparable, and that would be the Roth, okay, the Roth IRA. Now, the problem, or it's not a problem, but the reality of a Roth IRA is that 9 out of 10 people, or more like 99 people out of 100, are not going to be able to find a way to contribute $30,000 a year into a Roth IRA. It's just not feasible. Now, there are, I suppose, certain ways around that. If you have a Roth 401k at work, your contribution limits are up to around $19,000, $25,000, depending on how old you are. And then I suppose it's possible for you to also establish a Roth IRA outside of work. But for the majority of people, it's going to be virtually impossible for them to contribute something like $30,000 a year into a Roth IRA. Even if they were, they can't touch their gains until 59.5, or they pay a 10% penalty. And almost all of the money in Roth IRAs is invested in mutual funds, which means most Roth IRAs are 100% subject to market risk. Now, that's not a terrible thing. It's just a reality, right? It is what it is. The reason I love Index Universal Life Insurance for high income earners is because as long as it's done the right way and you're playing within the rule book that the IRS has already given us, none of these limitations, none of these drawbacks exist in the Index Universal Life Insurance space. So I tell people all the time, if an Index Universal Life Insurance policy is done the right way, meaning you're paying as close to the maximum premium as possible that the IRS has already set forth in the Tamra, Tephra, Defra guidelines, as long as you're paying as close to that premium as possible, you have a well-structured contract that's going to be an asset class for you that more than likely you're going to love over the long term, as long as you understand how it works. If you're not paying close to the maximum premium, remember, not only is there a maximum premium, but there's also a minimum premium. So if you're paying close to the minimum premium, you're not going to have a policy that is structured for maximum cash and income. And if you're paying close to this minimum premium, chances are this policy is not going to perform for you, which is why I tell people all the time, Index Universal Life Insurance is a beautiful thing because the IRS has set in stone the benefits that we know and love associated with life insurance, tax-advantaged growth, tax-advantaged income, and as long as you're structuring it as close to the maximum premium as the IRS will allow, you're going to have a policy that's going to perform really well over the long run, and more than likely, you're going to love it as an asset class. If you want to explore how an Index Universal Life Insurance policy could work for you, I'm going to encourage you to go to my website. I'll link it at the top of this video, but it's leveragedwm.com/IUL-review. leveragedwm.com/IUL-review, and you can fill out a real quick quiz. I think it's 4 or 5 questions. It's very easy, very simple, and then it'll basically prompt you to book an appointment with me where we can discuss exactly what you're trying to do, how much you're trying to contribute to this plan, how much you're trying to get out of this plan, what your time horizon looks like. All that is crucially important to determining whether or not an Index Universal Life Insurance policy is right for you. If you'd like to explore that, go to my website, fill out that quiz, schedule an appointment with me. I'd love to chat with you further and see if this is something that you could potentially take advantage of in your portfolio. And as always, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to my channel, click the bell to get notifications, and let me know in the comments what else you want me to tackle in the realm of life insurance and tax-advantaged income going forward. This has been Matt Decker, Leverage Wealth Management. I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.